Call to order the Plan Commission meeting on January 17th at 6:31. First on the agenda is approval of minutes from December 20th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Steven, seconded by Randy. Any changes at all? Seeing none, we go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. I do not have anyone that is here to speak on a non-agenda item. I think everyone's here for something on the agenda, which is great. So we can move on to agenda review. Anything we need to change around?
No changes.
All right, so let's get right to the first one here. And we've got a couple of people here from Royal Capital. We've got Terrell Walter, we got Brian Munson. You guys can come up and talk to us about the project here.
Hey, good evening, all. Just reintroduce myself, Terrell Walter, Executive Vice President with Royal Capital Group. You all know Brian. I'm sure he's no stranger, but we're happy to be back before you all regarding the site that we brought forward before and had an approved GIP. Brian will do a high-level overview of where we were and where we are today. We're before you on a slight amendment that we think still maintains the character and intent of the site, and we're looking forward to moving towards the next steps with your support.
All right. Well, thank you, Terrell. Again, Brian Munson with Vanderwall and Associates. Tonight we're here to talk about a transition from the plan that's up on the screen right now to what is being proposed, and just to walk through kind of the whys and the whats. Effectively, as we started to get into the final discussions, we weren't able to reach agreement on a couple of pieces of discussions on property acquisitions. And so we had to go back and do some additional redesign work to keep all the grading on site, as well as keep Laniello Court in place. So when we did that, we went back and looked at some of the staff comments and some of the things that were discussed going into the project and tried to integrate those into this. But the net result is a project that's very similar in context in terms of overall configurations of streets, of uses. Although there is a reduction in total unit count within the current proposal, we still tried to hone very closely to the distribution of rental and ownership, as well as the overall character. We were able to look at the for sale product and deliver that in a townhome format, so a vertical format, something that we think is going to be a little more closely aligned with market demand. And so we're excited to be back tonight to talk about some of those changes and the overall context of the project. But again, very similar to what we talked about previously. This GIP amendment will leave the framework in place so that we can move into a specific implementation plan submittal here shortly that'll let us move into construction of the project yet this year. I think the one thing that we do want to have a conversation tonight about is how we approach parking for the senior housing. That is an item that's challenging. As you're are well aware, this is a very challenging site from a grade and from a existing conditions standpoint. And so the proposal in front of you tonight from the design team utilizes, consistent with the last plan, a surface parking approach for the senior housing. That's done out of a financial consideration, and Terrell can talk at length about that. We acknowledge staff and its comments in terms of a request to integrate underground parking or some other parking approach for that, but really we're limited somewhat by our financial components of that and the physical configuration. We did do some additional study work. We looked at garages to see whether that could be integrated as a way to do that, but didn't feel that was a solution that necessarily created an environment that was to the benefit of the overall project. So again, we think we're very excited to be back here tonight and are requesting an approval for the GIP so that we can go forward to the SIP stage.
All right, you ready for a staff report? All right.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So as Brian noted, this project was originally approved in April of 2022, and because of the changes necessitated with the neighboring property owner and the not abandoning Laniello Court, we asked that the team come back for a new GIP and a new preliminary plat. So that the It's very similar to what came before Plan Commission previously. Staff memo does mention the 36 covered parking spaces. Staff has misinterpreted the intent of the applicant. However, we would just like to say that we hope to, as staff, continue to work with the applicant to address any technical or financial constraints that still might make it possible to do some covered parking for the senior housing. The reason that staff feels strongly about that is because it is typical, and in all of the other apartment complexes that Plan Commission has approved, they have approved at least a third of the covered parking of some sort. So a third of the units would have some sort of covered parking. So we hope to continue to work with the applicants on that issue. Otherwise, staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat request with 19 conditions, and then staff also recommends approval of the rezone request with 4 conditions. So,
All right, I have one person that wants to speak here. We've got, I think it's Matthew Fleming, who's here. If you'd like to come up either side, we've got a couple mics here, they all work. And just a reminder for the public that you've got 3 minutes. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Hi, my name's Matt Fleming. I'm a lawyer with Murphy Desmond. I'm here to speak on behalf of Dale Osborne. I know this project has been before you on various iterations. I think it's fair to represent Dale's concerns by looking at the overall history of this. This property was once planned as business, kind of a business industrial or business park, I believe it was, and changed to a mixed use based upon a previous development proposal that had some 40,000 square feet of commercial space along with a lot of live-work space with some multifamily, but a lot of one-bedroom lofts and so forth as well. Even last proposal that came forward still had in the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000 square feet of retail, and I think Dale believed that that the overall project was going to be much more similar to what had been proposed earlier by the At Edge project. But now we're back with another iteration that has gone even further towards residential. I understand that we now only have about 17,000 square foot of commercial space. And we also have a great deal of larger apartments and townhomes, 2 to 3 bedrooms, which suggests, perhaps a lot more families here, which is a significant concern for Dale because as you look at the site and the challenges involved and the tremendously steep slopes involved in that rear yard area, we have, just one small kind of playground, but other than that, there's really no place else for kids or any place to go. This is billed as sort of a livable, walkable sort of community, but with only about 17,000 square feet of commercial space and nothing but a busy county highway to connect you to any place else. This really isn't a livable, walkable community anymore. This is a large residential development with a lot of family component with really no usable functional open space for the residents there, and right next door to my client's property, which is an active quarry, which is a significant safety concern. Among the things that if this goes forward we'd like to see is something addressing some fencing or anything to keep the children from coming into the quarry area. We also have just concerns, looking at Royal Capital's history. I don't think there's anything that we've seen or that's been discussed in the past that suggests that they're, have the experience to deal with a site that is this challenging, this many phases and this much housing going in. The one development that we're aware of in Madison we know has had some significant issues over there. Don't know if it's the same type of housing or how much that component is really going to be here, but
I'm sorry to cut you off.
Sure.
That's your 3
it speaks of
minutes.
additional concerns.
Sorry about that.
Can I just,
I don't like.
one other thing, his neighbor gave a letter. Can I just
Oh, you can
enter
hand out
this
a letter
into the
if-
record?
If you want to, yeah, give it to Deanna for the record.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. And I believe that Douglas Johnson from Fitchburg is also registered. He doesn't say if it's in support or opposition, but it does comment, no knowledge of the proposal at all. I live directly across the road from the site. All right, and that's what I have for public comments. And so, no other public comment. I can open up to questions, comments from Plan Commission. Ed? You want to say something?
Deanna, can you kind of go over what is and is not happening with Laniello Court? I'm just a little confused at it, I guess. So what is the current situation, what was proposed to happen, and what is now going to happen? And is this what's going to happen that's up on the screen here?
So currently, Laniello Court is a public right-of-way with a little bulb, you can see that. It is not paved as a public street at this point. I think it's just dirt. Tell me if I'm wrong, Brian. So the idea here is the developer would install the actual public street, and I think you're proposing to give a little extra right-of-way in order to accommodate the construction of that public street. So the public street would end and then transition into private roads. So the entire street system will be private inside the development.
So the part out to where the bulb is now, from MM to the bulb,
That's
would be public,
correct.
and the rest will be private, but it'll all be a street, and the bulb, the cul-de-sac will go away. So it will no longer be a court.
I'm not exactly sure how,
It will no longer be a court.
Yep. So Laniello Court would remain, so it would be built as a public street, and would still have the bulb at the end here potentially, depending on final design of that. Beyond that would be the private street extensions. So in essence, the existing condition would be upgraded to a full street. Once you get to the end of the court, it would transition likely through a driveway apron to a private street cross-section that would then traverse through the balance of the site. Previously, the discussions were to vacate Laniello Court entirely. That's no longer being pursued. And so as Deanna mentioned, we'd be actually dedicating a little bit of additional right-of-way to allow for the construction of that to occur within the right-of-way itself.
Okay, thanks.
More comments, questions?
Why has the commercial component been reduced so much?
So when we looked at the site, we not only reduced the multifamily, so we reduced our total density across the site. When we looked at what's achievable and feasible per market, we did scale back on some of our uses. So we tightened up on our community convening space. In addition to that, we were showing on the southern end of the site an early childhood education center that we were doing a spec build on that was about 10,000 square feet. With the change, with no longer vacating Laniello Court and that portion of the site, we were pretty tight and constrained and wanted to maintain the housing mix of having a for sale and rental component on the site. So when we were reducing density, we wanted to sort of do a fair trade-off between the two. And so we maintained the uses that we thought were extremely viable and could all go on first phase.
Could you talk about the types of senior housing this is? Is it, I don't want to say market rate, but it's not assisted living or memory care or anything like that, is it? Or maybe it is. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the type of senior housing, and we typically don't say senior. I learned a new phrase. We say 55 and, 55 and wiser is the term that we've been using, but it's really for the active and mature population, independent living, no additional services, but we would do wraparound amenities where we would come in and do a needs analysis for the overall site. With the goal of providing complementary amenities and services for all residents and the greater community. And we also have a dedicated 55 and Wiser Center in the active and mature buildings as well, so that they have their dedicated space and can traverse across the campus to enjoy the other amenities.
And I guess I'll just follow up quick. You talked about cost is one of the big reasons, I think, and why there's not underground parking for that. Is that something that can be added if it's part of a TIF request? I'm assuming you're going to do a TIF request, but is that something that can be added if that's one of the things that we've kind of, as a city, say, this is really important, and is that something that can be added?
Yeah, so we understand that. So the site is, and one of the things that, for sure has been beneficial for this site, which is a difficult to develop site, which I think we all are aware of, is the fact that it has an existing TID established. We understand from early conversations with economic development how the city approaches TIF in sort of a pay-go structure, and we've been modeling this deal in that way. For the underground parking specifically, because we are on so much fill and, this site has site constraints overall, which I think we've covered in great detail with some of the reports and data that was provided. We've been able to quantify that underground parking just puts a great financial burden on the deal that we couldn't financially cover. And from our seat as a best practice in Royal Capital Group, we don't like to come to the city with a gap in our project saying, hey, help us solve it. We don't like to start there. So we're approaching it in a pay-go structure, and not that, we would need to come to the city for some sort of financial benefit up front. So developer funded is how we're approaching it, but the underground parking was in excess of $35,000 a stall based off early quotes that we got.
Randy?
Can you
Oh,
address?
wait, no, Randy. I'll get you next. Your name's not Randy.
I've been in support of the project up to this point, and I've attended a number of the community meetings and other meetings. And the underground parking is always a little bit of a sticking point. But I fully understand what you're stating and those dollars. But there was a time when you were talking about valet service as well. Is that part of would that be part of the program or part of the project? I just haven't heard that of late.
Yes, we are committed in our operations plan and go on record with the fact that we are going to have a valet service. So we're not strongly against having some sort of parking service or covered parking for the project. We've tried, and I think we work with staff to evaluate anything from a canopy, underground parking, garage parking, everything that we could here to solve for that. And make sure that we're developing a very marketable product, not only for our benefit, but for the city of Fitchburg. The valet service, we are committed to doing that. And our valet service will be one that, for the 55 and wiser population, where they can call down and do everything from warming the car up to, brushing it off in inclement weather and bringing it up to the front of the building, which will have a dedicated pickup and drop-off zone for both of the senior buildings. So we are committed to that, and we're able to cover that in our operations budget from a staffing standpoint.
Well, there's a key word there, operation budget. So it is included in for a long term.
Correct.
So once the project's complete and 5 years down the road, it's going to suddenly disappear. I mean, I think that's probably my concern with the valet parking. My mother lives in a 55 and above, and garage service is wonderful underground. And if this is 55 and above, to have that option is, I think, important, especially in where we live. So, anyway, those are my concerns as far as with the senior portion of the project.
Rich, go ahead.
Would you address the environmental corridor and the CARP-C approval or reclass or whatever you call it?
Yeah, that's something that will be, with the Ad Edge project, the environmental corridor was under initial discussions with CARP-C to be removed. Effectively, it's an environmental corridor for conditions that don't exist. Most of that environmental corridor has been heavily modified, graded, and filled, and all the trees that originally had the environmental corridor were removed. And so we would be pursuing a similar approach and recognition that condition no longer really exists.
So what's the timing of that?
So in terms of removal of environmental corridor, it's an application to CARP-C that could go in with the SIPs and with the final plats. So it's something that procedurally could be knit into the next steps.
But the whole thing is that's condition number 9. That's where I was
Yep.
thinking it's like a cycle. You can't proceed until that's done, but you have to proceed to get that.
Yeah, I think it is something that can be separated off and dealt with. It has been, I've had that done on other projects as well where the conditions no longer warranted designation.
Steven?
So we've talked about the senior parking. What about all the other buildings that you show here, the family homes and the townhomes? What is the parking situation for those buildings?
So those are all going to have garage parking associated with each unit. So they would be a traditional, either one-car or two-car garage, depending on which units. But each unit would have, if you have a one-car garage, you'd also have additional one stall of parking behind the garage. If you have a two-car garage, you would have 2 stalls behind the garage. So all of the, setting aside the seniors, all of the other units would meet parking standards that would deliver parking for each of the units independent of the other buildings.
The other buildings are in a stacked flat format or townhome configuration. The active and mature population building or demographic building is a more traditional building with common corridors, double-loaded corridors at that.
You're saying that I see that with the townhomes, but the family apartments are also that way, or are they more garden, like apartment style?
So they're stacked flat. So you would enter your unit from the ground level. If you're upstairs, you'd then walk upstairs versus having a common corridor where you would catch an elevator up.
Yep. And for those stacked flats, the parking is actually at the rear of the building. So you have a front entrance component as well as a rear component for vehicles. And that's where the first floor garages would be located.
More questions or comments? Ed, do you-
Yeah, what are your thoughts with regard to fencing or some sort of, safety barrier with regard to the quarry?
We're supportive of that. Again, we do anticipate that families will live here. That's certainly something that, we're willing to look at and work with the neighboring landowner on a solution that suits both of us and meet in the middle there. This isn't the first time, fortunately or unfortunately, that Royal Capital has developed near a quarry. We built a development right next to the Hamburg quarry on the east side of Madison, and it's all family units, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and we work with the Hamburg family to make sure that it was safe. So
what did you do in that case? How'd you handle that?
We did fencing as well as a natural berm that would berm up about 5 feet from the parking level. So we were able to buffer it and separate it by parking as well as natural landscape elements and fencing.
Okay, thanks.
I think just my other comment is that this is a challenging location. I mean, it's old landfill, but it's an area that I think needs this to be done, and I think that there's a lot of challenges to it. Like any development, is it exactly what I would want to do? No, but it's pretty close, and I think that, hopefully we can work with staff to find some way to provide the parking for the senior housing. But I love that there's an ownership piece to this. I mean, that's a huge thing for me because other people that would come in might not do that and probably wouldn't want to do that. And I think that's a huge piece, and I think it's something that makes this such an attractive neighborhood because you have such a wide range of housing options here in this neighborhood. So to me, to be able to redevelop kind of an eyesore, frankly, into a nice neighborhood like this, I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Other questions or comments, at least on the plat request? Was that one first? Anything else? Or, yeah.
I'll move approval of preliminary plat 2490-23 with the 19 conditions as noted by staff.
I'll
Second.
Seconded by Randy. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. And then we've got the rezone requests. And so, is there anything additional you want to add for the rezone request?
Nope.
All right, anything you want to add additional? Yeah, all right. I can open the public hearing for that. Let's see here. Matthew, I don't know if there's anything additional. You wrote down for A and B. I mean, they're really the same project. I don't know if there's anything additional that you wanted to add or not, but at least wanted to give that opportunity.
I think he left.
Oh, did he leave? Okay. All right. And then Douglas Johnson also, registered on this one, but again, I'm not sure if it's positive or negative for that. So seeing nothing else for public hearing, I can close that, but open up to further questions or comments from Planning Commission. I think we probably talked about it pretty extensively, so if you want to do that.
I'll move approval of rezone 2491-23 with the 4 conditions as noted.
Second.
Submitted by Janelle. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, nay. All right, that is also approved.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, next up is the conditional use permit for the existing gym off Anton Drive. I think Amy Sanborn is here to talk about this. Yeah, if you want. What's that?
I thought I was 5th
Oh,
on the list.
no, I got it.
No, that's great.
If you want to wait, you can wait.
You're 5C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that meant 5th.
Yeah,
No.
it used
All right.
to. We changed it.
Yeah, so do you want to tell us what you're doing here?
Sure. Well, as I think everybody knows, it's a hot fitness studio. The fact is, honestly, is that post-pandemic, non-franchises are not surviving.
Could you get just a little closer to the mic? We've got
Oh,
one
sure.
person online. I want to make sure you can hear you.
I'm always loud enough, so I'm not used to having to be by a mic. So the truth is that post-pandemic, health clubs are not popping back. I think you can see that from the franchises are surviving, or the big boxes, but the little guys just aren't. And so the reality is that I'm still down 50% of what I was attendance-wise 3 years ago. And so that business runs at a loss every single month. And the reality is the rest of the building really needs to help out in order for me to survive. And so what I propose is really as narrowly drafted, and I think Planning Commission added some things that I'm perfectly fine with, is having a limited number of events per month and no more than 2 with 250 people, everything ending by 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, no later than midnight Friday and Saturday. All other events smaller, and a lot of these will be during the day, baby showers, bridal showers, a rehearsal dinner. The thing that I would like to do is have a band monthly, not in the summer, nothing outdoors, is to have a band once a month. And that's honestly how I'm going to survive. I mean, honestly, the business does not survive without having the help from the rest of the building. I think somebody addressed it potentially opening Pandora's box. I think the CUP as drafted prevents that from happening. I'm almost 59. I do not want to run a bar, a nightclub. That's not what this will ever be intended to be. I sent some pictures of the parking lot, the fire lane, because I think there were some concerns about lighting. Let's see, what else that I think parking. We have 85 spots, and I spoke to the Latino Chamber of Commerce, which has taken over, I'm sure as you know, the old Roughing It, and they're more than happy to share their parking lot with me. So I've tried to address every concern. I appreciate if you have more questions, but I think that's it. That's what I'd like to be able to do.
All right, do a staff report, please.
Okay, so this, the applicant, just to be clear, is already has approval to do fitness and health facility at this location. And what's coming before you is a request to add to the existing conditional use the ability to do amusement recreation services. So that would be events and say, for example, live bands, bridal showers, wedding receptions. So that's what this request is. The applicant, and like I said, was approved for fitness club, fitness, yoga back in 2015 by Plan Commission. The property is located at Anton Drive and part of the Anton Drive redevelopment plan. Mad Power Fitness, she currently has, this location and this business currently has a Class B alcohol license to serve. So that will not be an additional need here. The applicant is proposing a maximum occupancy on the property to 250 persons with the belief that most events would not reach that occupancy. The applicant proposes the hours, and staff has put the proposed hours into the staff recommendation for the conditions. Fire and police also had some concerns regarding security cameras, site lighting, fire lane access, parking, and specifically on Carriage Street. The applicant states that security cameras are installed on the site and operational in the entry area, over the bar, and in every common area. In addition, the applicant stated that the fire lane stays clear, and the site currently has 85 parking spaces. Plan Commission should, consider that, further determine if the proposed parking and access considerations are appropriate for the proposed use. The building inspectors, so the city building inspectors did visit the property on January 4th. They determined that the property is safe for public gatherings up to 250 persons and that adequate exits and restrooms have been provided. Your packet will also show some photographs of the site that will show the lighting and site conditions. The applicant hosted 2 public meetings on January 9th, but stated that no one was in attendance to either event. She did meet with the Latino Chamber, who stated their support of the project. Staff recommends that the proposed use for these events be considered an accessory use to the current fitness use. So what I mean by that is that the both uses would function together. If the applicant so chose to not do fitness and move completely and only into the events, we would ask her to come back for a revision to that conditional use. So we're recommending that Plan Commission approve the events, live bands, bridal showers, wedding receptions, rehearsal dinners, as an accessory to the existing conditional use. In addition, staff does recommend approval. I made an error on my staff recommendation, specifically item number 5, which I should have put 5:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. for Friday and Saturday. So hopefully.
And confirming that's 5:30 p.m. to 12 a.m.?
5:30 a.m. to midnight.
12 a.m.
Yes, sorry.
12 a.m. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And also one other thing, it looks like the number 1 is on here twice. So is there actually 7 conditions?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay.
And the 5:30 a.m. is a fitness class.
All right. So you're good on
I'm good.
staff report?
Yes.
All right. I will then open the public hearing. I do not believe we have anyone for the public hearing that wants to speak from the public. So I can close the public hearing piece, but open it up to questions and comments from Plan Commission. Ed?
From the floor plan I was looking at, there's no operating kitchen in the building anymore, is there?
No, those are the fitness rooms.
Okay, so when you have an event, it would be catered in?
if people choose to cater in, but we don't serve any food.
Okay.
Other comments, Stephen?
No question, just a comment that I appreciate your due diligence in trying to hold community, neighborhood events to, have people voice their opinion, and also that you met with the chamber, the Latino Chamber of Commerce, and have worked that out. I appreciate when an applicant comes and has all that already done, so kudos.
Thank you.
Rich?
I was concerned with the parking, but I used to spend a lot of time at the dry beam when I was younger. And the parking's the same. But there's no, I don't know if they had parking on Anton then, there's no parking on the east side of Anton Road. But that was a concern of mine, but I'm glad to hear you work with the Latino Chamber of Commerce to get that resolved. I'm curious about the meetings that you had with the neighborhood because I live there. And I didn't hear a thing about it till this Saturday morning when I was reading this. So how did you communicate the meeting?
I sent a letter to everybody that Deanna had suggested I write to, and then I hand-delivered to Three Fountains and also hand-delivered to Latino Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have?
Just a quick question. So for clarification, the conditional use would go away in the event of change of ownership of the business. Is that correct?
The conditional use is for a particular location and a particular business.
Okay, so this business could continue to operate with a different owner.
It runs with the land.
Correct.
It runs with the land.
If they stop doing the fitness component to it, then it would go away.
Okay. I think that's where we just need to be careful that we don't get into a situation where I'm not sure that I would be opposed to this property being a bar restaurant again, but I just want to be clear what we're approving here. Okay.
Other questions at all or comments?
I'll make a motion to approve conditional use permit CU-2494-23 with the 7 conditions noted by staff with an amendment to condition number 6 so that it reads 12 a.m., not p.m.
Second.
Sent by Randy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, that's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we've got a couple actually that are the same for the same project, looks like. And it's the farm consolidation. And I'm not sure if we've got someone here to speak to that or online. It looks like it would be Teresa. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Come on up and talk about what you're doing.
Hi, I am Therese Hansen, and this is Robert Talarczyk, who did the survey on the site. And would you want to go ahead and explain?
We had a large acreage here, a large farm, and really ultimately the owner wanted to split out a smaller piece for her grandson around the existing buildings, and then north of the buildings there's some pine trees and things up there, and it's basically just a rectangular lot, going around all of that. And then the balance, lot 2, is just all of the rest of the ag land.
All right.
And the purpose that I've heard from the grandson would be that there's a large yard, and then there's also some woods going behind, and he's expanded just slightly out on either side of the yard. He wants to have some organic gardens, so it would be, agricultural as well. And the nature would continue to be agricultural of all of the property.
All right. We do these a lot. Sounds pretty standard. Just staff report.
Yep. So this is a request for rezone and subdivision. The new parcel, so the larger parcel, Lot 2, will remain exclusive agriculture, so it will remain AX. Lot 1, the proposed Lot 1 would be rezoned to RR, rural residential. The properties are outside of the urban service area, and the existing home and accessory use will remain. We did have a comment from Public Works that any driveways to access Lot 2 would need to align to Blizzard Road, which connects right here. And then if there was another need for a driveway, it would need to align with the existing driveway on the south side of This proposal is, well, this is part of the Gust Farm, which in our rural residential development files is Farm 99. It has a total of 3 claims for rural residential development. Therefore, an affidavit of record will need to be filed and recorded assigning those claims between either Lot 1 or Lot 2. And so two of those claims may be used on the property for single-family residential, but at least one of those claims would need to be designated for rural residential cluster development. Staff recommends approval of the certified survey with the 8 conditions, and staff also recommends approval of the rezone with 3 conditions.
Ed, did Egg and Rural first talk about this?
Yes, and the applicants were not there at the Ag and Rural meeting, so we weren't able to ask any questions. I think we understood what was going on with the 8-acre piece, and there's really nothing coming out of agriculture that's currently in agriculture, so we didn't have any issue with that. I am curious, right now I assume that all the ag land is accessed off the existing driveway for the home and the buildings, correct?
Wasn't there another?
Or is there another?
Yeah, I think there's another, I don't have the aerial photograph in front of me, but.
Just by looking at Google Maps, it looks like there is a path coming off opposite of the driveway that's on the south side of them, towards the east. Yeah. So it looks like they already have access coming from the east.
Where is that? Because that's one of the conditions that, I don't know whether it's the county or Public Works was concerned about, is that the ag be accessed from across from Blizzard Road.
And then go to the east, and there's a driveway on the south side. They want that to be their access, and it looks like it already is the existing access. Yeah, I mean.
So it was a Public Works comment that I referred to, and it looks like they are aligning right there. Can you kind of see that? You can come back.
I thought they wanted it aligned with Blizzard Road.
Or if they wanted another one.
Oh, if there's another one in addition to the one that is.
Yeah, it looks like about, I don't know, maybe 300 yards west of the southeast corner of the farm, right? There's a drive there.
Okay.
I think Public Works was just trying to stay ahead of any issues.
Got it.
To communicate that there would be appropriate places to put a driveway and there would be inappropriate places to put a driveway.
Yep. So since the 2 driveways are already existing, there's nothing that has to be approved by the county.
I
we're
would
aware of.
not imagine so.
Okay. Because that came up too, that we thought that you'd need county approval for the driveways, but if they're both already existing driveways, then that's probably, then I guess I don't know. I don't think that's the case. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions or comments or anything else?
I'll move to approve certified survey map CS-2492-23 with the 8 conditions noted by staff.
I'll second.
Seconded by Rich. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. All right, that is approved. And then the rezone request, I don't think there's anything additional, so I can open the public hearing for that. I don't have anyone here that wants to speak from the public, I believe, so I can close the public hearing. And again, if there's any further questions or comments from Planning Commission, we can do that. Otherwise, we can do a motion.
I'll move approval of rezone 2493-23 with the 3 conditions as noted.
Second.
Seconded by Randy. All in favor, say aye.
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 And if you're opposed, say nay. All right, that is also approved. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, next we've got, looks like Bob Shea's property, Orchard Point, for a senior housing project. And let's see here, I'm not sure, oh, perfect. Come on up and tell us what you're doing here.
Good evening. I'm Jim Gooley. I'm Director of Development for Senior Living with Ryan Companies in Minneapolis. I'm here to request an amendment for the Shea property on Fitchburg. We are going to be basically just south of the Target store and just next to the new Quarry Ridge Independent Living Community. Yeah, there you go. There's a quick site plan. And this is just to rezone. We'll then be coming forward with our GIP application here in the near future. Just to give you a quick overview of the project, the T-shaped piece would be the three-story assisted living aspect, and the circular kind of shape on the other end would be the memory care. So as opposed to the prior applicant that was 55 and wiser, we'd probably be 80 and wiser. And so our average age is probably, in that 83-year-old and up. We are licensed as assisted in memory care. We feel this is a great complement to the Quarry Ridge project right next door, where they're just independent only. So this really pulls, I think, more of a campus feeling together for that full continuum for senior living. We are partnering with American House, which is owner and operator, one of the top 25 in the country. They're a private company with over 70 communities, primarily Midwest, East Coast, and Southeast. And so we're excited to be able to partner with them. They've got specific background in just managing assisted and memory care versus, typically it would be all three independent, assisted, and memory care. This just works better. They've got real experience with that. So we're going to have 109 units. It's going to be really a full 3 meals. There's, staff. Probably at our peak, we'll have 41 staff members between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. That'll be when it's completed and fully leased. So that's probably the maximum there. We'll likely have, and I can go into this, only 4 residents with vehicles. Based on the age of our residents and the fact that they're moving into assisted or memory care, there are very, very few people that have cars. We have a car service. That's not really, transportation is not really something they need to worry about. So with that and our employees, 41 probably employees at peak, and then the balance of the 86 spaces would be really just open for guests and visitors. So we have really more parking than we would traditionally need, but we are providing 86 spots with 109 units. Let's see, we had a traffic study done by Ayers. That I think is also in your report, but they came back with a decrease in what their daily trip count would be. I think originally this was maybe a home improvement store contemplated, so we're going to be significantly less than what it's zoned for. I had a neighborhood meeting last week, invited all the owners within 500 feet of the site. 2 people from Quarry Ridge came to the meeting. I had a lot of extra cookies and coffee, but they were in support of what we were doing. I also had a phone call from the owner of the Limestone Ridge Apartments, and he was in support of what we were doing. I know in the staff report there were several comments that we will address as we come forward with the GIP. but happy to answer any of those questions. I think I've covered everything. I just wanted to, make sure that I was here to answer any questions, concerns. We'll be, after this, coming to hopefully the Common Council and then through to the GIP and SIP. So with that, I'm available for questions or any comments.
Okay, we'll do a staff report first. Go ahead, Deanne.
I think that was a very good overview. I just want to kind of provide a little bit of context. This is an amendment to an existing comprehensive development plan, and maybe one of the older comprehensive development plans that we continue to work with. And I think we're on Amendment 18 or something like this. So that whole area around Target and Hy-Vee there is part of this comprehensive development plan. And originally, this site was slated for like a home improvement or specialty retail. So the applicant's coming forward to Plan Commission to change that original designation from retail to this assisted living. And what we need to do is just make sure that we're keeping in tune with what the traffic considerations were. And so staff doesn't see any problems, and staff supports approving this amendment to the conditional comprehensive development plan. And then there's just the two conditions.
All right. I will open the public hearing. I don't have anyone here from the public that wishes to speak, so on this one anyway. So I can close the public hearing, but open up to questions and comments from Plan Commission. Go ahead.
So I was on Plan Commission at the time that the original CDP came in, and we fought very hard at that point for more residential, which we didn't get. And now we're getting it, so I'm happy.
Oh, good.
I like that, and I also like the fact that the trip count for this is going to be way lower than what else might have come in here. There's an awful lot of traffic in that area, so I think that's a real plus as well. One question I had for consideration, you got 86 parking stalls, you're not going to use them, right? One thing maybe we can talk about is just banking some of that parking, approving it as part of the project, but you don't have to build it. And you can always put it in later if for some reason you need it, if there's some change in the use of the property. But I think that's something that I'd like to discuss with the commission if you're interested in talking.
We're open to that. So we just have a green area that could be
Yeah.
later converted to parking if
you
necessary.
actually need
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Sure, we could entertain that.
And I know for other projects that have had memory care, assisted living, we've had pretty low parking because these are people who aren't driving, well, they shouldn't be driving. They don't have cars anymore, or someone's taking the keys from them. So, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I thought it seemed like a little bit more, which is interesting. But, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Rich?
I don't agree with it. I was surprised when I read that of the parking that 41 employees, 4 resident, and 37 for guests. And I thought that was very low for 109 people, or 109 units. But the AIRS data was very thorough, very good, and over my head. So so I would prefer just to leave it exactly as it is now. I trust everything that I read from AIRS, and it was, like I said, very complete. So I would just as soon see it completed as planned here.
So did that indicate 37 guests at any given time?
Well, the sheet, I think, refers to the peak time of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So lunch hour, long lunch hour. So,
Okay.
I think that was actually, that was our response, where the AIRS group really looked at more trip generation and number of cars in and out of the driveway versus the number of parking stalls. So the 41, I guess, I mean, we're good either way, but the 41 employees, plus 4 cars, if you will, that are probably just going to be sitting there. So you've got 45. The rest, I mean, highly unlikely that you're going to have unless there's an event. in the theater, whatever, that there would be any number of visitors of that level, potentially on a Saturday when families are visiting and that type of thing. But I'm open either way.
No, I'll change my mind. That's good. I'm just thinking now, I go visit my brother, and there's lots of open parking when I do that. So nobody else is there.
Yeah. Other comments, questions? I'll just say I like the project as well. I think it adds, again, a diversity of housing options in this area, which I think is so important. We've got too many neighborhoods that are being built as just all the same thing, mainly market rate apartments. And to have this, I think, it's, like you mentioned, it's a great complement to the housing right next door. I could see a spouse living in one part and another spouse living in the other type of thing. So I think it's a great way to kind of continue to build out this neighborhood in Fitchburg. Randy?
Yeah, I'm going to just underscore that as well. And just looking at Google Maps, it really just kind of completes everything there as far as residential. I just cannot see another retail going in between two larger residential. So I think it's a good direction to move to complete this area.
Anyone else? Or you want to do a motion?
Well, if we wanted to make an adjustment or allow for an adjustment for parking, to have some of it banked, Deanna, would you be comfortable just leaving that to discretion of staff, future discussion with the applicant?
I think at this level, at the comprehensive development plan, I don't think we have to get that detailed.
Okay.
My suggestion is when you bring forward the next steps with the GIP and the SIP, you can determine what you think is acceptable, what you think can be potential future build parking, and I think that's probably the best way to go as we get further refinement in the planning process.
Sure, thank you.
All right, so we'll look for that in the GIP process. Someone want to do a motion then?
I'll move to approve comprehensive development plan amendment CDPA-2495-23 with the two conditions noted by staff.
Second.
Sent by Janelle. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed say nay. All right, that is approved. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
See you again.
Yes, you will. Thanks.
All right, next up is the final plat request out in Terra Vesa. I believe Michelle is online to talk about this one. Go ahead, Michelle, whenever you're
Michelle's
ready.
on mute.
You're on, yeah, there you go.
Hi there. How are you? Thanks for having me. So I was just asked yesterday to listen in. So I'm not really prepared to speak about anything except this is another phase.
That's fine.
That's okay. We can. Oh, no problem. We can just have staff do a report. I mean, this is,
Okay.
we've seen this already, and we've done a number of these, so we can just have staff go into her report. Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. So this is the third addition to Terra Vesa. And the applicant is requesting to create 82 lots, including 72 buildable lots. And this follows on the preliminary plat that Plan Commission approved, a revision to the preliminary plat that Plan Commission approved last year. So staff has reviewed the zoning to make sure that the lots comply with the smart code standards. Of course, Terra Vesa is all smart code. The proposed lots are being developed as T3 and T4 under the traditional neighborhood development option of smart code. And I guess I don't really need to say too much about that. And the applicant provided outlots 74 and 76 to satisfy staff's request for 12-foot passages of access between Lacey and Romaine Road. The parkland dedication, that's something that staff is going to need to figure out as we move into the subdivision improvement agreement. Staff does recommend approval of the final plat with 13 conditions. And happy to, I guess I should have shared, but I'm good.
All right. So I do not have anyone from the public who wants to speak, but I can open up to questions and comments from the Plan Commission. Any thoughts at all? This neighborhood continues to grow very quickly, and it's very popular. All right. Well, someone can just go ahead and do a motion then. Randy, you got it.
All right. Motion to approve final plat request FP-2489-23.
I'll second.
Wait.
Well, excuse me, with the 13 conditions noted by staff.
And I'll
Second.
All right. Sent by Rich. I'll give it to you still, Rich. All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, say nay. All right. That is approved. All right. On to our next item. It's a tree preservation ordinance discussion. There's nothing formal to take any action on, but we got a couple of members of the tree committee here to talk about an ordinance and get our input on. So I'm not sure if Linda, you're going to take the reins here or who's going to take the reins, but you guys go ahead and.
Yeah, we're trying to get our screen share up and running so that we've got our presentation up. Just 1 second.
That's all right.
Wasn't it under Safari?
It was. Now what is it doing?
No. Stop your sharing.
Stop share, okay.
Okay, now let's go back to share screen.
Okay.
Safari. I don't think it's up there anymore. I'll tell you what. We're going to go there. Let's go back over to Safari. Let's look.
Okay.
And see if there's a tab still open. Cancel this right now.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, there you go, right there.
I'm sorry, I was here at 6 practicing.
Okay, back over to Zoom.
No problem.
Okay. Okay, so go down here. Okay.
Okay, now there's your screen. Share.
All right. So you should all be able to see our presentation now. I'm Craig Rapp. This is Linda Brewer. We're from the Tree Advisory Committee. Purpose of this presentation is just to show you all what we've been working on for a couple years now. We believe part of our purpose as the Tree Advisory Committee is to advance the forestry purposes here in Fitchburg. So this presentation is going to focus on this new protection ordinance that we've been working on, kind of break down the why, the when, what we've been doing, and all of that jazz. So.
See if you can make it go full screen. There you go.
Oh, it's not showing up there though.
That's not.
Why is that happening?
We're moving it, it's not showing up.
Sorry, our changes
it-
aren't showing up on the big screen over there. So.
Oh, I think you're outside the, go back to Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right, we'll just leave it like that then.
Okay. Let's see if you can go full screen.
So,
from here.
Yeah, I can. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Been gone.
there we go. The why. For a while now, the comprehensive plan has had the goal of developing a tree protection ordinance, as well as having a tree canopy goal in our comprehensive plan. So our thought is that this tree protection ordinance can satisfy that part of our comprehensive plan, as well as contribute to overall urban forestry, which we think is an important part of a growing city. Let's see.
I think you just have
There we go. Another aspect of that is that it has already been a part of our rural residential development criteria. So in the rural areas, there's already a forestry plan in place that is kind of covered, but our urban areas are not being covered sufficiently at this time, we believe. So the what are we actually doing? The tree preservation plan has two main parts. We included a red line version in your packet. Your packets are much longer than ours, so I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't all read 243 pages of them before the meeting. But just in broad terms, our goal is to add into the plat stage of development a trees survey. So right now, platting doesn't require any amount of survey of what trees exist. And then also a tree preservation plan. This plan wouldn't have any very specific requirements, so it's not something that would be impose a whole lot of burden. It would just be, here are the trees we have, here's what we plan to do with them. Largely, the goal is to provide more information to you, to anybody reviewing the plat process, so that there's more data points to review. As a part of that plan, we would have a tree advisory or forester opinion on the plan, so we could come in after the survey and say, hey, this tree is really important, it's an older tree, harder to replace, things like that.
So you would have that information when you're looking at the plat, the preliminary plat, and that the preliminary plat process is what would trigger this.
Yeah. And then the other part of the preservation plan is just updating our definitions to include these new setups. So largely, it wouldn't really add a burden to the process. It would be a tree survey at one point, and then for you, you could choose to accept with the tree preservation plan or not. There's not a whole lot of change in the process that would be happening at your level. We would just be able to have a voice there. And the reason behind that is that right now, there's really no mechanism in place to let you know, hey, this is a really old growth tree, or there's value in saving these, or anything like that. So a lot of times trees are just taken down without thought, really. And we think that that's probably equally an oversight as it is any kind of actual malicious act. So here's briefly what the changes are. So in the platting area of our ordinances, we would add this survey requirement. A lot of the details in this we're free to talk about, but they do come from established forestry standards from other tree preservation ordinances around the state or even out of the state. Things we did quite a lot of research to see what is fairly standard for the industry. And then this definitions is the other part I talked about. Largely, it just defines things that we're talking about in that plat area so that people have plenty of detail about what the new requirements would be. So I mostly talked to this already. This is part of the preliminary platting process. It would be triggered just then. In the future, there may be more goals that we have as a tree advisory committee, but right now we're just talking about the plat process. This is just a quick overview of where we've gone with this so far, so you know it's not kind of shooting from the hip, coming off the cuff. We presented back in 2021 to the Parks Commission. We've discussed it with the city's attorney. We've had lots of discussions actually with Sonia from the Planning and Zoning Department before she left, and then various department heads. We've met with Mayor Richardson, again with the city's attorney. Actually, we have another meeting upcoming with her to really make sure we're on firm footing legally. And now we're kind of making the rounds to present it to different committees and commissions so that you're all aware of what it is that we're working on.
And to generate questions and ideas from you as well, of course.
Again, we kind of hit this on the head a lot because questions come up a lot about when this ordinance would be in effect. It's with the plating process. So, for example, a question that comes up very frequently is if I'm a homeowner and I want to cut down a tree, what will this change? And the answer is nothing. It won't affect people doing things on their own private property. It's really just at that plating process that this would be triggered. And then the means here, the review would come to the Planning Commission. You guys are very familiar with that. But the idea would be you just have a little bit more information with which to make your decisions. And then the City of Fitchburg Urban Forester, who unfortunately she had a situation, couldn't be here tonight, but she would be reviewing these plans as well. So that would just provide her the chance to give you or future them the chance to give you input.
I want to say we met with the Parks Commission on December 1st, and before the meeting, the chair sent you a link to that meeting. Anna was there at that time, and we presented again, and she also gave a lot of extra information about this.
She does have a lot more very specific answers than we have, so that I think there's maybe 45
But we've been
minutes.
practicing, so.
45 minutes or so of that video, so if you have questions after this, it's, I believe Sue sent it out before this, so. Also, my email's up there. I'm happy to answer any questions, talk directly if anybody has questions that we don't address now. There's a couple last slides here that I'll let Linda speak to.
So I think this is the area, the property that's just been developed that neighbors McKee Park, right next to the new playground. That's a park that's in my neighborhood. I walk through that all the time. And most recently, so this was a situation where the trees were not, both the property and the trees immediately surrounding it were not on the plat. And so what ended up happening was, well, that's what ended up happening, is that this tree, which was 200 years old in our park, which was just outside the boundary of this development, was lost because of the kind of development that occurred. So they put like a path all the way around the exterior, and after they had done all of the work, they came back and our environmental engineer came out, and there was no way they could finish doing their project, apparently, without removal of this 200-year-old tree. It was a bur oak. It was 200 years old, and bur oaks are known to live at that age another 100 years or more. So I think those are the kinds of things we're trying to prevent. The first picture in this PowerPoint was another tree. I think that was on the Hartung property that was just recently approved. There are 15 heritage trees on that property that have just been all downed. And I think the whole point is that if you as a committee and we as a city are able to work with developers initially, have those trees on the plat so we know what we're working with, that we can all work together and protect some of these very valuable trees in our community. Because it's not the same to plant a new tree. That does not replace
10 new trees for
Right.
one old one. It's very hard to replace a 200-year-old oak.
Right, right. So I think the goal is to work together, and more information just gives us better decisions. And if the trees aren't even on the plats and there are no recommendations about them, then you don't have that information when you're looking at them. And I think in order to be fair to developers, they need to know, they're looking at the ordinances. So if it's not in the ordinance, and then all of the work that they do before they get to you are not going to be in consideration of those trees. So the goal is for everybody to benefit.
All right, now we can open it up for
Yes.
any questions that any of you have.
First, Deanna, is there anything from staff side that you want to add at all?
Not at this point.
Okay. All right. So I can open up to questions and comments. I think just kind of the overall summary, I think, is that they're asking that require essentially tree inventory be done by the developer. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing I've heard we're going to hear from developers. It's $5,000 to $20,000 cost, depends on the size and how many trees, and there's a cost to that. And so, I think one of the things that I think is still unclear legally is, can we even prevent them from cutting down these trees? And I think that's just the feedback I've heard from the development community, is just that we got to spend this money. I don't know that we can stop them from cutting down trees. One of the things I've just been thinking about over the last year is I'd like to see it almost more of an incentive to encourage these people to save these trees, because there's some great trees that probably could be saved pretty easily. And can you provide incentives like reduced parking or park requirements or fee in lieu of requirements, things like that, that give a financial incentive to these developers, because that's really what they care about, is making money, as you know. And so I think that there are ways, because we have seen some developments that probably pretty easily could have been changed to save some pretty great trees.
Right.
And I don't know, and I think that's kind of the question that I've heard from legal, and I don't know if we have an answer to that yet, is how much could we even enforce something like this? Is it just an added cost that gets passed on and developers complain about it, blah, blah, blah? But if we can, that's one of the things I was thinking about, and you didn't mention, is if we can provide incentives to these developers, financial incentives, let's be honest, then they're going to be more likely to do this, and it's going to be in their best interest, because I think a lot of people like to have a great, big, beautiful tree in their neighborhood instead of making it look like you built a house in a farm field. So anyway, I'll open up to other questions and comments from there.
Have we checked with any communities to find out if they've explored something like that and then how that's gone?
There's certainly a lot of communities who already have tree protection ordinances. I think it was Mequon is one that I talked to extensively, and they actually have a very well-developed program. Their situation's a little bit different than ours, but the city size is about the same, and the developers know what to expect, and they work together. They actually talk more about like outlots and conservancy development, and it's worked very well for them. So yes, there are tree protection ordinances throughout the country that are coming up, and of course with cities where we have land that's being developed so quickly, it becomes more urgent.
We did also quite a bit of research into what types of incentives we could offer, and from a ordinance level, there's really not a whole lot that we are empowered to do. Scott Endo, I believe, had some ideas about how it could be worked into benefits for the developers, but just as a beginning point, the 5 to 20,000 estimate you gave is significantly higher than any forester we've talked to. So they do believe it's really more in the $2,000 to $5,000 range, which is still an added cost, but it is significantly less than a $20,000 addition for these surveys.
And I think it also was pointed out that it costs money to take them down. A tree that size costs money for developers to remove as well. So hope is we can maybe use some of that in a different way. Can we ask Scott if he has anything he wants to add right now?
Absolutely, yeah. Scott, do you want to add anything right now?
Well, and I think I would certainly echo your comments, Mayor, that try to make an incentive, and certainly the tools that we currently have are parkland dedication ordinances and park improvement fees, and I would suspect the majority of the developer would see a benefit of a mature stand of trees, and if they would realize a park improvement or a parkland dedication credit as part of that saving of the tree, if you would, I think that's what you're after, Mayor, to try and make that negative a positive in regards to finances of a project and those kinds of things. And I think I certainly want to publicly thank Linda and Craig and all of the work that they're doing. If anything else, I am confident that the awareness of these kinds of things are kind of in the forefront now. So I think that they can definitely be proud of the work that they've done to move this important issue.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Other questions? Chris.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. You mentioned that it should be only at the preliminary plat, but then I also saw on one of your slides, I thought it said or rezone request.
I saw that in the slides as well. That isn't really meant to be in the slides. The actual terms is just in the preliminary
Yep,
plat.
good question.
Great question, though. I caught it.
We started out with a bigger goal, more comprehensive, and after talking to Valerie, we narrowed it.
Sure.
And I guess really the point is if we don't know what's on that property, we don't know what we're looking at in making approval for development.
And the other thing was I noticed that you had pretty strict language that it's a 6-inch diameter at chest height. Is that for any kind of tree or is it specific? I didn't see any other clarification from what I read other than 6 inches at breast height, and that gave me pause.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do actually have a list of desirable trees that the forester maintains already. So it would be 6 inches at breast height for those types of trees, which severely reduces the burden there. The reason for that reduction as well is that there's a lot of trees that are invasive or otherwise problematic that the forester, nobody really needs to save those ones, so.
I'd even seen a note in there that if it's multiple trunks, that you take the two largest, add them together, if that equals 6, I'm going, well, you could have a birch tree that is 10 years old. I don't want any developer having to worry about a 10-year-old birch tree because, you know, who cares? Versus a 200-year-old oak.
Yeah, it's a very fair question. So
now, that example that you also gave from that right by McKee Farms Park, that wasn't on the actual plat. So if we had this already existing when that came forward to this body, would we have ever caught that? Because that wasn't on their plat.
That's a really good question. That's a very, very good question. So maybe we want to think about that. Maybe we want to think about like the property immediately around it
Like
needs to be included on the plat.
Or around the actual plotting or something like that. I also don't understand though how, I guess how that actually happened. I mean, that just seems like.
I know.
We agree to, this is your land. I mean, that's like if I go to my neighbor and I just chop down their tree and it's like, well, sorry, it was, within 10 feet of my property line.
I know.
That just seems like, so I also want to make sure that we're weighing, something like that happens. If this isn't going to catch it, that's a great example to use, but also we want to make sure that we're not being overly, encumbered in how we're addressing it, but yet actually addressing a real issue. Versus, and so that's why my biggest concern was the 6 inches and knowing that it's only for certain types of trees, I think helps a little bit with that.
Right. Thank you so much. And we will add that to our conversation too. You're absolutely right. Would it have caught that tree?
And I think that's also, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that's another example too of, we identify that and, gee, maybe we shouldn't put a sidewalk close to this 200-year-old oak, and it might cost a little bit more money to run the sidewalk further around, but again, to have that credited for the extra cost, to say, yes, we agree, we don't want to get too close to this 200-year-old oak tree and ruin their root ball, and it's going to die in a few years. Let's move the sidewalk, but we also know it's more expensive, so let's also, again, that's the incentive piece to it in my head to make sure that the developers will do this because it also benefits them.
there's also that awareness piece. Anna could speak to more specific examples, but there have been times where there's even been a plan to save a tree, but because nobody knew that they needed to not drive over the roots right next to it, it ended up dying because they didn't put up the little plastic fence around it, which is a really easy thing to do if you know that that's something that would help. But if you don't know, if you're unfamiliar, it just doesn't necessarily help. So.
I know I work with the Highlands of Seminole Neighborhood Association. I'm on the board, and we have somebody who wants easement across our joint-owned property to put in fiber optics. And so I've done a lot of work with our arborist who, and yeah, I think that to point, that's why there's a plan. And actually, Anna, the urban forester, has some really good information on our website describing what that is, how to protect trees under construction circumstances. And I think there also certainly is some responsibility for not damaging the roots of your neighbor in that process of doing so. And I'm not sure if that is state law. That's something I need to follow up on, but that's my understanding. So.
Any more questions?
I had two. So one one of the questions I would have is with our forester, whether she's going to have the bandwidth to do this. I mean, I take a look at the number of packages that come through to this body on a given month, and if she needs to take a look at each one of them potentially and do an audit of those assets, I could see that taking some effort. So that's one of the questions that I would have of her, is to make certain that she feels like she's got the capacity to do that. I agree with you, Mayor. I think that this is going to be initially, it's going to be a change, and change is never easy or comfortable. And so if we've got ways to put some incentives in place for the developers, I think over a period of time, it's going to become much more intuitive, and people are going to they're going to feel good about the results. But I think initially it would be good for us to find a couple, maybe 2 or 3 best practices where they've put some financial elements in place. So at least we can take a look at some of those models and find something that makes sense for us.
Yeah, I would echo that, because I was just thinking about that too. Even if we can't put it in here, I love the idea of it to incentivize, and because that's one of the biggest complaints about building in Fitchburg is the park improvement fee, which is why we have such great parks. But we have to be careful that we don't say, oh, for this developer, here's a $5,000 credit on your, and here, this one gets $10,000. I mean, we have to have that ironclad as to what that offset would be. And I would also just point out that I love that idea, because you're diversifying where the assets that we get as a city that we put into our parks. We are now saying we're going to take a portion of that and take it away from our parks and put it into all aspects of the city where we're building and keeping tree coverage, which great. But that also means you can't build and maintain parks at the same level depending on how much of an impact this might have. Just last month we approved of quite a large park project, and so those are also things that I'm thinking about, that I love the idea of how you diversify those funds and make it more equitable. But then you can't expect to build this multi-million-dollar park every couple of years, because we're not going to have those park fees to the same level if this is at a certain level of discount for development.
I know in Swan Creek, there's a lot that was preserved with a huge, I think it's an oak tree on it. It's kind of by the path that goes by the nature area. And I think that's an example of, they identified this beautiful, great tree. There's a lot of value to it. I don't know what incentives it was. Phil Spium is just a great guy, so maybe he just saved it because he knew the value of that. But that's an example of where we have in the past identified a valuable tree, and we were able to have that saved, and that was dedicated to the city. Rich?
It was part of his parkland dedication, Aaron, actually.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. And we need some spots for parkland that are a little more passive too. I mean, we don't need basketball courts and baseball fields in every park. They're wonderful, and I love them, and we want to have those. But it's also, nice to have a little more passive parkland as well sometimes. Rich?
I'm happy to hear this, and I think we really need it, because we're not a typical city. We're not all urban. We're Fitchburg. We're a little of everything. And a lot of cities don't have this opportunity, or it's too late, So I really think this is a great idea, and I'd like to just see it go, only I'd like to see it twice as much as what you're doing.
Thank you for that.
Randy?
I'm going to echo the concern, or the comments as well, Rich's. I'm somewhat tentative, I think only because it's new, and as Janelle mentioned, it's change. But this has been great discussion, and I appreciate you bringing it to this body, and I know we're going to be carrying it forward in other meetings as well. But I do have the one concern as far as, and I think Steve touched upon it, is the 6 inches at breast height, and maybe the clarification, maybe it's clarified with the type of tree, because what you're showing is almost criminal, versus now we're talking about 6 inches. I'm not real comfortable with what we're talking about, a 200-year-old tree that's been destroyed, but yet we're talking about 6 inches here. I guess I need to see some more specifics and to move this project forward,
Do you know roughly how old a tree is when it's 6 inches?
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's what I'm trying to drive at as well.
Yeah, so
height and,
Before he answers, did you get this in your packet? I don't think you did. Did you? Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
good.
looking at it right
Good,
now.
thank you.
Reading it.
Oh, I didn't,
Yeah, I'm
I just
sorry.
wanted to make sure you did. Okay, great, okay.
So Anna could speak to it better than I could, but the 6 inches at breast height is actually, it's a fairly standard industry level for tree surveys, which is how we arrived at that, where pretty much across the board, every tree survey statute, for lack of a better word, that's not the word I was looking for, but used that measure. But it is also, it sounds like it's going to encompass more trees than it does. It's a significantly
I think that's my
larger
concern.
or sorry, I meant to
when
say
they're
the
platting.
exact opposite, which is that 6 inches at breast height is actually much larger than you would think. So there are less trees that hit that in the young stage than you would expect. And then there's no requirement in the plan or in the ordinance to save trees that are over that. The idea is more to have an awareness of what's there. On a map, you would want to look at it and say, okay, here are where the big trees are during the platting.
Well, I think you're answering the question or bringing at least the awareness, because I'm picturing in my mind an area, and it's just covered with trees, but yet they're less than 6 inches. I mean, are we putting value on the tree, like the trees that you were showing that 200 years old and they're destroyed, or are you trying to also save everything that's small? And I mean, maybe that'll all wash out, but I don't know. I just raised a concern about the 6 inches.
Right. And one of the points that I know Anna has made throughout all these discussions is that it's more difficult in 2023 to establish a tree now that will grow 200 years old or 25 years old. Oh, sure. I mean, it's more difficult. So if we have trees that we value that have already been well established and they're valued trees, if the land can be developed and save those trees, it's worth consideration. And it's worth encouraging the developer to do that. And I know there will be times when that's not true. But I think that's the point. Or I know that Scott has talked about a variety of ways that he's worked with the parkland credits, and sometimes it's a lot of trees that have been able to be saved. So there's some flexibility in that. It sounds like that people with expertise like Scott and Anna, can work with the developer on those kinds of things, because climate and our situation in 2023 is so different than it was in 1823 or 1923. So I think we're just trying to be progressive thinkers and really deal with the problems that we have, maybe that are larger than developing land, but that's all part of it.
Just to follow up on that, and I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. We need to find that balance, and I just
right.
And I fully understand the concern that you're raising.
So, and I think the other thing that I hear Anna say is that, this is private land. It's not like she can go in and just check it over. she doesn't have a right to do that. And that's why the people who own it, the developers, they're the ones who can go, on the land and have somebody map what's there. And then it's, with the skills that she has and an arborist has, it's not as work intensive as it would be for most of us to kind of to figure out what's there fairly quickly.
Thank you.
So,
Stephen?
Yeah, I was going to say that was my whole question about the 6 inches thing, because in the supporting documents that we have reference different things, and it references a document that I didn't have, which is the list that you must have in terms of what trees are included in that list, and then
yes.
It's actually an updated list on the Fitchburg.
It's on our Fitchburg website, but we can get the link and send it to you. We'd be happy to do that.
And then, just to be clear, so the idea is that the preservation plan that gets developed out of this process comes before us, or we know that here they are, but there's no other binding thing beyond that. It's just that we would have that awareness when we're looking at a preliminary plot. Because what I'm thinking of is the one off of MM that we just saw earlier today. That was a preliminary plat, so that would be a good example of, we would have had the trees on that when we were looking at it, and, consider that. But not that it's any...
But she was describing the trees, and I thought, that would have been really nice to see them.
And to get back, earlier you asked a question about, we have talked with Scott and Anna, and they both believe that with the volume of plats that we have, even if it increases, that she would be able to work that into her schedule. So we were very cognizant of what that would actually entail for her. So I've had a.
It's a
mind I
great
wanted to get back
question.
to
I've
that.
asked her that many times as well, so.
Janelle, do you have another comment?
Steve took care of it.
All right, Ed.
I think I line up very much with Rich on this. I think this is a great idea, and I'm glad we're talking about this now. Obviously, there's devils in the details. As far as the number of preliminary plats that we look at here, they really aren't that many. They don't come in. This is not every CSM. This is a preliminary plat, so this is a fairly large project if it's coming in, and I don't think to ask the developer to spend, a few grand to give us that information is unreasonable. One question I have is, would you expect the developer to go and hire an arborist or a forester to do this, or to come to the city and pay a fee to the city forester to have it done? And the reason I'm asking that question is you don't know what you're going to get from a variety of arborists. You're going to get a different thing all the time. But from a consistency standpoint, being consistent from plat to plat to plat and understanding what we're being told when it comes to us, I think, it might be a good idea to look at a fee that is paid to the city to have our city forester do the survey, if that's feasible.
I think that's a great idea that actually has not come up before. So we have a meeting coming up with Valerie, who would be the right person to ask if that's something that even we could do legally. One of the pitfalls we fell into and how we arrived where we are is that there's a whole lot of things that we wanted to do that are just not allowed. So that one is a question mark, but we will take that as a great suggestion, because there is the potential for it to be varied. Right now, the ordinance as written just requires a certified arborist, which is a very broad. There's a lot of people who might do it differently under that umbrella. So that's a great point.
To add to that, I don't know that she has time to do that, but could you also have a list of people to use?
Sure.
A list of, here's 5 people that we vetted that we believe in, and can you use one of these 5 people maybe? Because I don't know that she has that time.
Yeah.
But that's can be pretty extensive work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you want to know is you might have maybe a 150-year-old white oak out there, and guess what? It's hollow.
Exactly.
So now now you're going to save it, and you're going to build around it, and it's going to fall over in 10 years, right?
Right.
So
my impression was that when Anna gave an opinion about what she would recommend be saved, and then how to do it, but what should be saved, that it would have to take in consideration exactly that kind of thing.
So whoever's doing that work is going to have to, identify the quality of some of the older trees.
More than
6-inch
identifying the
you
tree
don't
being
worry
there,
about.
but how healthy is it?
Yeah.
My understanding is that is a fairly standard part of surveys, though, is not, down to the very details, but a strong to weak kind of, I don't know the terminology they'd use, but something along those lines. But that would be a good follow-up with Anna.
Yep.
So you're going to send something around to the commission so that we can see what the species are that you're identifying?
Yeah, the list is available on the website, and we'll make sure to circulate it after the meeting.
Great. Great. Thanks.
Janelle?
I think what you're hearing is there's a lot of excitement and all sorts of details. My suggestion from process is that we would go ahead and, as you suggested, have certain vendors that are qualified to know which specific species, what specific criteria. Ultimately, if we're going to go ahead and consider some kind of a financial incentive, we want to make sure that that's a tight process. So we don't want somebody to come in here and say, hey, we're looking for our park, dedication relief, and then find out that they were not in compliance with our process, and then we've got an issue on the back end of this. So I think it needs to be very clear and very tight how that works.
I don't know how much the city particularly wants to get in the of sponsoring private, but maybe the solution there is to sort of certification. If there's some type of leak certification for arborists, and maybe there's some in the area.
Yeah, there is. Thank you. Yes. Yep.
Anything else? I don't see anything. There's no action to take, but thank you both for all your time.
Thank you all
Thank you very much.
very much.
Yeah. All right. One more item, Resolution R0423. Deanna, do you want to speak to this?
Certainly. So this is a request for an underground electric easement. The request is made by MG&E, and so this request is coming before you from Public Works, and it's on a outlot in Crescent Crossing, and the outlot was dedicated to the city for stormwater purposes, and in order to take down some electric poles north of Lacey on South Seminole, they would need this easement. I think it's pretty straightforward. The city would be granting an easement to MG&E for underground electric work. That's all I got.
Any questions or comments? Rainey?
It's just on the outlot, correct?
It
I hear
is.
that and read
Yep.
that? Yep.
Yep, I could probably just show you where it's supposed to go.
Can we also have them underground some poles just off Lacey Road on McGaw Road, just throwing a road out there that might have 5 poles on it that someone might live on? Sorry. Never mind.
I don't know about that one.
All right.
But the easement is right about in here. So it's approximately in there on Crescent Crossing. So Lacey is down here and this is South Seminole. So.
I'll move approval of Resolution 04-23.
Second.
Sent by Stephen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. All right, that's approved. Report from department.
Okay, I do have just a handful of slides kind of to wrap up 2022. I thought I'd just walk through a little bit of where we are on some of these bigger projects. So just a handful of slides for us. Let me just go grab them. Maybe. There we go. I think it looks better on mine. Okay. Smart code. So lot 35 in Terra Vesta, that's 189 apartments. So those are the apartments that are really big that you see right off of MM. Those were the comments that we got. Why are they building concrete? Right? Remember? So the concrete was for the parking structure on the interior, and then they're building wood framed apartments all the way around. So that is moving right along. It's actually at this site right here. I think that was probably approved well before 2022, but just wanted to kind of give you a few updates. Lot 36 and 37 in Terra Vesta also, that's these 2 lots. And pretty recently, Zach approved the Article 5 for those. So it's about 78 apartment units, garage parking underneath. You all have approved a final plat for Paxton 3 and 4. Those are for townhomes. You can see that here on this final plat with those small lots, those townhome lots. Outlot 53 and 54 was also approved for a final plat. Staff is still working through getting those 2 projects recorded. That would be another 20 townhomes. Good news is that I think we're really close to having our first commercial development in Terra Vesta. A wine bar, a massage, and then a beauty salon. I think it's...
Those are all separate businesses, right?
Yes. Okay. But maybe
but maybe. So I think we're pretty excited that we're opening that door up for some actual commercial development. And those are the mixed-use buildings that are right along here.
And I believe, based on what I was told, it's going to be wine and bourbon.
Oh, well, there you go.
Not just wine, also bourbon.
Good. Good. And then the Parks Department has been working on Egg Park. I don't have that in my picture here, but as part of the dedication for Terra Vesta, there's a large area that is being designed as an egg park for the long-term development. So kind of just a recap on Terra Vesta. Any questions? Okay, I'll move right along. 9 Springs, so that's at kind of in Sherrill and Lacey here. Lot 55 is expected to be constructed soon. That's 57 apartments. That'll be right on the railroad track and East Sherrill there. And that'll be the first kind of commercial bar restaurant in this 9 Springs. So I don't think Zach's approved the zoning permit on that yet, but I expect it soon. Lot 64 was just recently approved for the CSM, and I think, Zach, you're still working through the Article 5 on that one. I can't remember. Me either. They all run together. And then, of course, you all approved the 7th edition to 9 Springs, which is this entire area. We are still working with the developer and Public Works to sort through the infrastructure pieces. So it has not been recorded yet. Sometimes these things take these are pretty complicated things from the Public Works side of things. So just some updates with 9 Springs. Couple more, just 2 more slides of I pulled out some of the bigger projects from last year. If I missed something, send me an email, let me know, and I'll follow up. Oshala is under construction right there on Oshala and Index, 170 apartments, and also they have some commercial space with that one too. Lacey Ridge Townhomes, that is the one that I get more questions than anyone. What's going on the north side of Lacey, on the south side of Lacey, right? I get so many questions about that one. So that is Lacey Ridge Townhomes. Plan Commission probably saw that one maybe 3 years ago. Multiple times. Multiple times. Yeah, that one has probably been before you several times, but they have all the equipment out there, and they have broke ground on 47 condo units.
Where is that?
Next to the crossing on Notre Dame Drive.
It's on the south side.
Just over the hill.
And then Highfield Reserve is probably our I would think one of the biggest projects that Plan Commission worked on last year. The first 2 phases of infrastructure are complete. I would expect some of the single families should be coming fairly soon. We also Plan Commission approved 228 units of multifamily too. And I do expect they'll move quickly to break ground. Sorry. St. Ambrose School was included in that development too. And that kind of got put on hold. I don't have any additional information about that. I don't think we've had a meeting with them since last June or July. I'm sure they still own the land, but I think they're working through some of the background yet on that one. We also approved a comprehensive development plan, a preliminary plat, and a final plat for Thermo Fisher. The goal there was to sell that parcel that is right on the corner of McKee and Spoke Drive there. And there's still some things to work out in terms of public infrastructure, and that project just kind of got totally on hold. Of course, Traceway North, that was the Plesco property project right to the south of Hub. That one is on hold too. We did have a meeting with Plesco related to Hub last week, and they're indefinitely on hold with that project. Edgewood College is still moving forward. Their next step is the conditional use permit. I totally expect them to be coming really soon with that conditional use permit. General Beverage, you might remember that they had an addition, and so they're under construction. The Latino Chamber has moved on into the Anton Drive property. Hartung Fields, they have their preliminary plat and their GIP. They're still working closely with economic development and public works on infrastructure. I think they're close in identifying a multifamily builder there. So I think some things will probably move in that direction, multifamily first. Avalon over on Index, another in venture capital one. They have their early start permits for building review. So I think they're about ready to break ground here too. I think they definitely want to break ground by early March. And then the solar farm, no news on that, but they're still expected to have construction in 2023 yet, so still this year, still this spring. I have not heard anything that any reason that the project is not moving forward. So that's just a quick update. Some of the larger projects that came to my mind. If I missed something, let me know.
Lots of things going on, Ed.
And we may see other projects go on hold as well. Right now, we've got a combination of construction costs and higher interest rates, which are causing apartment projects certainly not to pencil out, that would have penciled out at the lower rates that we had a year ago. But I think it could impact other types of construction besides apartments as well. So it doesn't mean that these things won't happen, but I think people may hold off until either the construction cost materials come down or rates come down, or a little bit of both.
Anyone else? All right, we can go ahead to announcements. Any announcements at all?
I'm going to miss the meeting next month.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
By Randy, second by Steven. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed to adjourning, say nay. All right. Maybe someday. All right, we're adjourned.